So this session is tips and tricks for sophisticated test creation, which I'm slightly worried oversells it. But what we really wanted to do with this session is just unlock a few of the features in Surpass that you might not have known about around test creation. So there are a few things in there that we think people maybe don't know they're there, or they don't know how to use them, and so they don't make the most of them. Some things are just a little bit hidden off, some things have been in there a while, so maybe people have forgotten they're there. And a few of the others are just new features that maybe if you miss them in release notes or you don't know Surpass that well, you might not know they're there. So this was just about picking up a few of those little known features that hopefully you'll all find useful. We won't have time to go through them obviously in lots of detail. I do tend to over-explain things as a trainer. So if we run out of time or anything, we do have handouts that cover all of these features, so you can take them away with you. Just in terms of what we're going to do today, there's myself. I'm Emma Richards. I'm BTL's Documentation and Training Manager, for anyone who hasn't met me before, which just means that my team produce all of the help files, reference guides, the videos that are out there on the learning portal, and we also deliver training to clients and partners as well, so there's quite a lot of familiar faces in the room today. I've also got Richard here with me today. He's our head of design, and he does a lot of work on usability of Surpass as well. So if you've got any questions, if you want to talk to him about anything, he's here and he's just going to help out a little bit as we go along. So we're going to run through the features just one by one. We've got some images in the slides. And after we've been through those, we've got a bit of a handout that I'm just hoping we can go through, because what we really want to know is, of the stuff we've talked to you about here today, did you know about it? You know, was it useful for you? And also what we should do going forward, because with things like this, we want to get the word out. We want to make sure you're making the most of Surpass. So if there were all these features and you never knew they existed, we obviously need to change something about the way we communicate with you all. So that's one of the exercises we're going to do towards the end. So if you have any questions at any point, do stop me as we go. I'm just going to run through these features and try and explain them to you. So please do just raise your hand if you've got any questions at all. Okay? Okay. So we've grouped these into some particular areas of the system. We're going to start with setting up the content and the test, move on to setting up the marking, and then a little bit about reviewing tests as well. We've got in there. Okay. So one of the first features that we're going to look at is grouping items together as a scrolling page. So I'm sure occasionally you have situations where you don't just want one question on a page. You might need 3 or 4, or you might have a case that you want to set up with a source text and some questions related to it. So this is just about how you can create those as one stacked page rather than lots of separate pages for the candidate has to click through. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. For those of you that use Surpass Release 12, you might be familiar with the Test Wizard approach, which is with the item authoring screen. We've also got the test creation screens, or the item bank screens, as our 11 customers will know them. You can do this in there as well. It's just a slightly different method. And then finally, I'm just going to pick out this show page requires scrolling alert, because obviously if you've got this long page with maybe 3 or 4 items, you don't want the candidates to accidentally miss the last one and not respond. So that just kind of pops up and warns them. So let's have a look at some of these. Okay, so this is the test wizard. This, you can see, is what a standard test might look like when you first created it. It's got 3 questions, 1, 2, and 3. And then what you do is you just click on the question, drag it, drop it on top of the question you want to group it with, and once it's in that group, you've got the scrolling page rather than lots of separate pages. So when you're finished, it might look something like this. Here, 1A and 1B, if you like, are together on one page, and then the same here for 3, 7, and 8. So you can just see you can build up those differently in the test. And what's useful about this method is that even though you've authored everything separately, to the candidate it looks like one question, but you can still mark it all separately. So all the stats are retained for each individual item. So it's not that everything's grouped together and you only get one set of statistics at the end. It's that you still get the individual bits, but the candidate just sees one page. Okay. So this is the same concept, the grouping with a scrolling page, but this is just in the test creation screens, or the item bank screens, as some of you know them. Okay, so I'm sure some of you will be familiar with these screens, but this is just your exam structure down that side. And currently these items are all separate. You've got create group down at the bottom, and that just lets you create what we call a group, which is the scrolling page. So once you've created the group, again, it's drag and drop. So you drag and drop the items in, you drag and drop them to a reorder, so you can create those longer pages just really quickly. So there you go, there's got 3 items in that group, and that will appear as 1A, 1B, 1C, for example. And then this is just to remind you that if you are going to do this, you're probably going to want to make use of the alert, and it just pops up in the bottom corner of the page. So if you ticked it here in the test creation screens, you get this little thing in the corner of the screen for the candidate, and it just sort of bounces there for a little second just to warn them. You're going to have to tick this to warn them. And they can press the little X to move it, but of course, if they're navigating backwards and forwards, you just want to remind them there's something at the bottom of the page. Okay. Are there any questions on that one?
I already did this for some students in my university. And still there was some student who forgot to answer the last question, although it was... yeah. We could see that on the result screen.
Yeah, but they haven't. It might be worth reminding them to check the progress bar, at the top of the screen, because that wouldn't be at 100% if they hadn't attempted that last question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a way of making that stay up any longer? Because sometimes when you navigate to it, you just knock the scroll just a fraction and disappears.
Right, no problem. I'll jot that down and we'll mention it to them if we can get it to a bit longer. Does it work with so having the X there, would you prefer it without? Where it just...
No, it's not that. It says if you navigate to a question which requires scrolling, you just accidentally knock the scroll wheel on a mouse, it disappears immediately.
Oh,
so,
yeah, so
it doesn't show the page requires scrolling. I don't believe it does when you go back to it either, so it only shows it the first time.
Okay, so making sure it stays up. Thanks. Okay, so we'll move on to the next one. No more questions on that one? Okay. Okay, so this is where we get into something that's a little bit more complicated. So this is about building tests and rules-based tests. So I'm not sure how well you all know the Surpass system, but just a little bit of background for some of you that maybe are not as familiar. We have kind of 2 kinds of tests. You've got your fixed tests, which is just where you say, I want these specific questions in this test in this specific order. And then we've got dynamic tests or rules-based tests, which is where you might say, I want 10 questions from this particular unit, 10 questions from another unit, and I want them to be at a certain difficulty level, for example, and you can build up rules based on that. So we tried to pick out a couple of things that are related to that. So I mentioned that you can have those rules that say, for example, pick 5 easy items, 5 medium items, and 5 hard items. But you might want to actually apply those rather than one specific rule. You might want to say for your test as a whole, we need a really good balance of easy, medium, and hard items. And that's where this specifying the overall p-value comes in. Is there anyone who doesn't know what a p-value or a facility value is? I can just explain that quickly if anyone's not sure.
I'll do it.
I'll explain it anyway, just in case. So your p-value or facility value, as it's sometimes known, is your difficulty level for a question. So any question in Surpass, it automatically has this value calculated, and it's based on how many candidates have got it right or got it wrong. So when you first create an item, it starts at 0.5, and that's considered average, medium level question. And the more candidates answer it, its p-value will either go up, if lots of candidates get it right, or down. So if it goes up, it gets closer to 1. If it gets harder, it goes closer to 0. So for example, an item that had a p-value of 0.1 would be quite difficult. Only 10% of candidates have answered that right. Whereas if it's 0.9, 90% of candidates have answered it right, so it's medium. That's just a bit of background on that. I'll just try and explain this feature. This is one that's a little bit hidden. I think people don't necessarily know this is here. They know about building rules and that you can do this with p-values, but they don't know about this particular feature. So this is my test. Currently, I'm highlighted and clicked on the top level, which is just the test itself, the test form. There's an edit button at the bottom that does different things depending on what you're selected at the time. So if you hit it when you're on the top level, you get this test properties window. We've got any regular Surpass users here who have never seen this before? Good to know, or not, depending on how we look at it. So this lets you actually specify value ranges for your test as a whole rather than for one rule. So if you come in here and you fill this in, so this section automatically populates based on what you write here and here. But you can say the minimum, maximum number of easy items that you'll allow. So if you want to create quite a difficult test, you can say, right, absolute maximum, I only want 3 easy items in there. But I actually want, say, up to 10 hard items. And that will look at your items and look at all the rules that you've built. And if it can't validate because it's not got enough easy, medium, or hard items, it'll warn you. So you just get this message that the exam's invalid. And that's obviously because it doesn't have enough items to meet the requirements that you've stated. So if I just go back, it's not just that you can specify how many, but you can also put in an average. So if you've got some sort of specification that says the average difficulty level for your test must be X, you can put it in there. And obviously we provide a range because it would be very difficult to get the exact p-value right, I imagine. But you can put in here what your minimum and your maximum for your average for your test as a whole is. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Any questions on that one? Okay. And we've got handouts, so don't worry if you don't have time to write it all down. Okay. The next one, it's a really little one, but I think people forget that. So in Surpass, when you're building your tests, you probably use search parameters, and you can do this either for fixed or dynamic, it doesn't matter, any test. And people usually, they look for something specific, so they say, I want items that have a particular learning outcome, or that are in a particular folder, or that have a particular question type. But you can also do not. You can say, I don't want these items. And I think people forget that sometimes it's quite useful for if, say, you've got processes around, say, quarantining, for example, and after an exam's been delivered, you move all the items into a folder, or you tag them somehow with a keyword that says they've been used. You could then create a rule in your future test that says, do not use these items. So if you've got them in a particular folder, or if you put that tag on, you just say, not this. And whatever else you put in, obviously it doesn't include those items. So this is just one example of where you can see it. It's in the parameter screen. There's others in there as well. You can do case sensitive and things like that. But I think this is one that people sometimes forget they can do. I don't know if anyone, does that seem useful to anyone? Can you think of any scenarios where I can see some nodding, that's good. So is that you like to exclude?
Say you've updated your item bank, but with new items. So we group in dynamic tests based on the test bank reference. So if we put new items into that test bank reference that we want to QA against the live test, then that would be a really useful way. If we just added something in the metadata that said not new, then that would exclude it from live test.
Yeah, so you can just use that as a kind of almost top-level filter. You might put that on before you bring in any other items, and you'll know you won't get anything
so
you don't
in
want.
that example, if you were to create an additional folder, content reducer, and you pick that folder and put not, you pick the folder and won't pick anything that's in that folder.
Yes, yeah. And obviously, I think for folder reference and all the learning outcome unit, all of those ones as well, and a couple of the other search types as well have it. So like item name and things like that. If you want to say, don't include any item with a certain bit of text in it, you can do that too. Okay.
You do on state?
I'm not positive. I'll check after. Sorry, there's just another image there that you can just see in the parameter screen. I'm sorry, it's going to be really hard to see from where you all are, but it's the equal sign with the line group. So it's just that you can see that you've applied that. And therefore, it's basically showing me everything I've got that's not in that folder. Okay. So just move on to the next one. This one's around marking. So I've noticed a couple of times that people that I work with as well at BTL don't actually realise this is here, so I thought it was worth bringing up today. There's a couple of things you can do, again, in the test creation screens to set up your marking that are quite handy. So So there's two things I picked out. The first one is setting the number of items to mark, which sounds a bit silly. I know, why would you not want to mark all the items? But this is for perhaps exams where candidates can choose what they want to respond to. So I remember sitting papers where it was choose one question from the following. I think in my English exams I had that a lot. But obviously when you're doing computer testing, you need to make sure that they're not penalised for not answering those other questions, because obviously typically every question that's in there, they'll expect to mark, and if it's a 20-mark question, they've not completed it, they'd be showing as a low percentage. So this is how you allocate for that. You tell it how many of those items in that section you want to be marked. I'll explain a little bit more in a second about how it works. The second one we'll look at is around comments and annotations. That one's quite straightforward, so we'll move on to that one next. So this is going back to the number of items to mark. So this is looking at a particular section. So you can see here I've got the top section selected in my test, and I've got the edit button at the bottom. And you've probably seen this before for changing content roles from fixed to dynamic. That's what a lot of people use this for. But at the bottom you've got number of items to mark, and you just choose how many of the items in that section do to mark. So in that scenario where it's write one essay, choose one of the following options. If you choose one, it will basically look at it, and obviously those are generally human marked questions, but it doesn't have to be. And the system will just look at it and it will pick their highest scoring response. So say they accidentally attempt 2 questions in the section because they've misunderstood, or they have an attempt at one, change their mind, and then go and fill in another one. It will just look at it, it will pick out whichever one got the highest score, and it will use that as their mark for the section as a whole. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Does anyone use that already in tests? Does anyone have any tests that function that way? No one?
That's good.
Great. Yeah, of course.
Will there be any facility to, rather than number of questions in a section to the answer, will there be any facility to answer 2 sections out of 4? We have one exam where we have to answer, candidates have to look at different sections and then want to choose sections. But all the questions.
Yeah. I don't think we have anything around that, and I don't know if there's anything on the roadmap, but I'll check with the product owners if there's anything on the roadmap for having that.
Because we'll be going to have that facility higher up the hierarchy.
Yeah, I can imagine that'd be useful. I mean, we have made some changes recently around sections and timings and block down of sections, so that might be maybe a logical next step for the future, so we'll bring that over. Any more questions on that one? Okay. No. Okay, so this is what I was talking about comments and annotations. So has everyone seen the marking screen of Surpass before? Where you can put the annotations on, you put the marks in, you put comments in. So all of that is really customizable. There's a button in test form detailed annotation settings. It's just in this kind of miscellaneous section, so it occasionally gets missed. But once you click on that, you get quite an extensive window where you can really customize what's there. So there's a few different things you can customize. Your kind of standard open comments where the marker fills it in themselves, and you can set word limits on those and things like that. You can even choose to allow them text formatting if you want, if they need to have access to that. You've got your standard annotations, which are the ones that are always on as a default, like the tick and the highlight and the box. You can turn those off if you don't want them available. But the first one I want to talk about is the fixed comments. So this is where you predefine a comment, and then it's available to all of the markers. So if you find that you've got markers who are putting in the same comments really regularly. Okay?
Sure.
Is there a question? Do you have a question? Or?
No,
Okay. If you've got the same questions coming up over and over, the same comments coming up over and over, makes it a lot easier for them if they don't have to type it in every time. So this is just you creating predefined comments. So you've got your fixed comments, you turn it on. Once it's on, you can add comments in there. You just type them in, save them. And then you can see they're appearing here, and you can keep adding those. It's a scrolling panel, so you might have quite a few. And then later on in the marking, I'll show you the screens. It's just like a sticky note. They can drag it on and drop it on wherever they want to on the response, and it just sticks that point. So then later on, a moderator or whoever needs to review that can see
And you have to do it for each separate test. No.
Yes, you do it on each test, but if you use cloning, you wouldn't have to do it every time. You could get them saved. Yeah. Okay.
Those comments then, with the candidate review facility, or do they have us appear there?
No, not currently. The comments and annotations are not shown in the candidate review. Would that be something that you would be find useful?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're people in remark exams though, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. If you.
Nobody can understand.
Sorry.
Sorry. I'm going to bring you up. You guys can you can help. Yeah. So yeah, they're visible within, say, the marking, remark, audit screens of Surpass, but currently not visible to candidates. Do you have any other questions on those? Does anyone use this already?
I would like to see just a general set, so you can click on each assessment. I would like to have this set.
Okay, so a group.
From a single assessment.
Okay, yeah. So
very nice, for example, in set of sections.
yeah. So just say subject-specific comments.
Some default annotations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously you can create your own. We do have some default. You can see the symbols down the side. As you get further down, they get a bit more specific. So things like does not provide evidence or.
It doesn't mean that. Then it's for just one assessment.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You want to create a full set that you can then say, for this particular test, we made this set available. Yeah, I'll put that back. So there you can just see the standard annotations that you're available. And not all of these are available as standard when you first create a test. It's quite a lot of them. It would take up a lot of space on screen. So you can see here, you can choose which ones you want. And they've got the text next to them, so when you see the marking screen. So here you've got a couple of them on, so understanding, there's a little UND symbol, but if you hover over it, it will say understanding, so if someone's reviewing it, they'll be able to tell what it represents. Got the little box there, the symbols box, that's where you drag them on from, and again, they stick to the portion of the text that they're relevant for. And we've got the fixed comments up at the top. That's the panel where you drag them from, so they'd all be listed there. And this is where one's been stuck on. So that's a fixed comment. And you can see, you can click on it to open it up, and you've got the comment text. Or you can minimize it, so obviously it doesn't block the screen. And with all of these, you've got the hide annotations button at the bottom, so if you want to just switch back and see the response on its own, you can do that. You can just hide it all off. So one of the questions on those? Yeah?
Question on the report. What is the point of using this annotation if the students cannot see? Is it for teachers?
It's more for audit purposes of marking. So if you want to check if a candidate says something was wrong here, it's much quicker to look and see all the annotations and see where the marks were awarded and why they weren't, and then provide the feedback to candidates. But yeah, I see your point about it would be good if the candidates can see them.
You can show them the centre in item rank as an option for or assessment, which is automatically show the centre, and then there's a tab in the secure assess which says view marked exam, and if that's ticked, they automatically go over there. They can see them and they can see the annotation. They can see basically what's there.
Yeah, I think it's an R12 to R11 discrepancy. The screen doesn't exist in Release 12. Show to centre, and obviously the way the universities work, it's a bit different because they don't have the concept of centres in the same way. So I mean, but they are available in, say, moderation or the audit. So if the teacher wanted to pull that up, bring in the candidate and sit with them and show them it is possible to do that.
That's true. If you assess 600 students,
yeah.
It's not
yeah.
Not an option.
Yes.
It's nice, but
yeah, it needs to be okay. Yeah.
Further development is good.
Yep. So if we can feed those back to candidates, part of the candidate review process, that would be useful. So we're going to move on to a little bit about reviewing tests. So we have a couple of things. put through here. So I'm sure many of you will have seen these, but for some people who are new to the system, it might be quite useful to point these out. So this is, the first one is about in the test wizard again, so we looked at that a little bit at the beginning. And the second one is in the test creation screens, or the item bank screens, for those of you who use Release 11. So these are all about sharing tests for review. There's quite a few useful purposes for these, I think, and people don't necessarily know they can do them all. So it's quite handy to go through these. So the first one, the web link, those of you who use the test wizard regularly will have seen this feature. The two features are very similar, so this one and the next one we'll look at. Very similar concept. So once you create a test, you get this option down in the bottom corner to create a web link. And what this does is it generates a copy of your test, a sample, if you like, of your test, and it hosts it on the Surpass service. It generates quite a long URL. It's not something that you could easily just type out or say to someone. It's something that you need to distribute the link for. It sends you it by email, and it's also available within the system. And you can then go to that link, try the test, take it, and it's really useful for either doing a quick check yourself if you've created a test and you want to see what it looks like. It's useful for sharing with colleagues to review if you want to ask someone to review the test for you, or if you need to get it approved by a body or another organisation. It can also be useful just if you want to provide kind of a basic familiarisation test to candidates. So if you maybe want to let them try out the question types, you're not bothered about keeping the results, they're just going to play around. But if you want them to be able to have a look at the test, this is quite useful. When you create it, you can see you've got the button there as well in the wizard. But when you create it, you choose the availability time for the link. So we don't kind of leave all these, they take up a lot of storage space, the tests are quite large. So we do limit the length of time that they can be available and the number that can be available. But you can edit this later. So say you made it 7 days, some candidates needed an extension, you can go back in and make it longer if you need to. But during that time, while it's available, you can distribute it however you please, either by forwarding on the email or by copying the URL. You've just got that URL, you open it. And again, it's probably worth mentioning that the responses are not saved, so this is not an alternative to scheduling the test, but this is just a quick way of getting it out there. Okay. I presume some people in this room already use this method. Do you use this for your review? Do people like it? Is it useful for them?
It's still limited to 10.
Yeah, I mean, that is for storage purposes because obviously we have to host them. But in the test creation screen, obviously there's no limit to the next one, which is the package. So that does kind of get around the limit. Okay. I'm not sure actually. I'm here for you. There is a calendar. Okay, so that's just, you can see there, if you go back in, you can see the little icon that means that a link exists. And then you can launch it, you copy, or you can delete it if you wanted to create some others instead, because like we said, there is that limit due to size. But the next one will be able to get around that. Okay, so that's just what the key code entry screen looks like. It's got a sample populated key code because it's not a real test, it's not associated with any candidate, it's just for you to try it out. So that's why it has the sample key code in there. And then when you get in, it just has the name sample candidate as well, so you know that you're in a package and the results won't be saved. Okay. So the next one's very similar, but just slightly different in the way you distribute it. So this is functionality that's available both in Surpass Release 12 in test creation and in Release 11 in item bank. And this is just around packaging a test. So you've got a couple of different methods for that. You can create a SCORM file. I mentioned that if you're wanting to use it in perhaps a VLE or another system. And we also have a standalone package test, which is just essentially a zip file, and you can do with that what you please. So that's quite useful, either obviously for review. Again, the package zip file is also quite useful if you want to put a test on your website. So people can go to that whenever they want. They can do a practice test or a familiarization test. A lot of organizations do that. I mean, do you guys use packages on your website? Yeah. So that's quite a useful feature if you're wanting to give people some idea of what to expect. You can package that up, host it on your website, And there's no limit to how many of these you can create, of course. It also means that if you are wanting to use it for review purposes, so if you're wanting to share it with someone, it's up to you how you distribute that. So whereas the link, some people think, well, it's not password protected, we don't want to use that. With this, you can put it on some sort of file share system that's got password protection. So you can, whatever your chosen method is, you can use your Surpass test with that method. It's a perfectly standalone file. It's a zip file. And all you have to do is download it, unzip it, and there's a file called index and you launch it. That's how you get access to the test. And it's the same as the web link in that, none of the responses are saved. It is just for trying it out. But again, really useful for familiarization. And you can have all of the usual feedback in there. So if it was a computer marked test, you could provide them the test feedback to the candidates. So they would get some information about how they performed, even though the results aren't saved. Okay. Do you have any questions on this one? Okay. So that's just showing the download of the file. I'm just going to skip ahead. It's in the wrong place. Okay. Again, it looks exactly the same as the last one because it is the same concept at the heart. It is a package test regardless of how you create it. So I'm going to move on and look at some things around paper tests. So this is, again, some of the release 12 paper functionality that was introduced. And I just think a couple of these features, maybe they were introduced quite recently. People might not know that they're there. Okay. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk through. So fixed versions of dynamic paper tests, paper copies of on-screen tests. So the first one, the fixed versions, we introduced dynamic content into the test wizard a couple of releases ago now, and that lets you obviously use dynamic rules to build what's traditionally an on-screen test. And we excluded that from paper tests because obviously a paper, once it's printed, it ceases to be dynamic. What you can do now is build a test with dynamic rules, and then for your paper versions, you can generate fixed copies. Oh, sorry, I've gone the wrong way. Lost my screen. There it is, wrong way around. So this test has been generated. It's got dynamic rules, and then what you just do is you just keep generating fixed forms. So if you want to have 10 different versions of that paper test that you can hand out in a room so that everyone's got a different version of the paper, you can generate one here, and you can preview them so you can make sure that the items in them are suitable and there's nothing that's a little bit odd. So you can just keep adding those as you need to go, and that's creating fixed versions of the test every time you do it.
So one would you
Yep.
can actually change the test name or reference or test form name or of this screen. Because if you're creating multiple versions,
Yes.
it's easy or very important to have an exact name or reference. So you can change it from this screen before saving the generated.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Excellent. I'll add that to my hand now. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add on that one or any questions? Okay. So I think I need to go back because I've got these in the wrong order. So this was to show you about how it's not just paper tests that you can print copies of now. You don't have to create it as a paper test. If you've got on-screen tests that you created in the test creation screens or in the wizard, you can download a printed copy of that. So, I mean, it's not just for, of course, using as a paper version, but for review sometimes I know people do prefer to review on paper. So if you've got a test that's compatible with paper, so for example, it doesn't have video, it doesn't have audio, and it doesn't use question types like drag and drop, which obviously you can't replicate on paper. If you've got a test that is just the standard question types, multiple choice, essay, what the others, pick from a list, gap fill, wherever, regardless of where you created it or what type of test it is, as long as it's compatible, you can generate a printed copy, and it will just appear when you click on download printable test. So everything that you've created, you can see here. I've got some standard on-screen tests, and they have just been, they're automatically included in this screen, and I can download the candidate paper and also the teacher one, which is the one that has the correct answers listed in it. So useful, I'm sure, for distributing to candidates, but also for review purposes if you want to do that. Yeah, sorry, it's okay. Go first.
Quick question. Does it use a template to do that? Because if you're generating a number of, if you're going to pull down 10 questions, will it automatically number those questions when it actually compiles the...
It does number them, yes. It's not templated in the same way that creating a proper paper test is, because when you create a paper test in the normal method, you upload what we call a cover page, but it includes all the formatting, borders, margins, footers, you can include all that in there. But this is almost just a quick download. It might need, so if you wanted to distribute it, you might have to edit it, but yeah, it does include the page numbers. Okay.
But it doesn't include to have match questions printed.
No, not currently included. Is that a question type that you use quite regularly? Okay.
And the next one is that I use it for administration purpose and for teachers to have a review of the testing.
Yes.
It says question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is it possible to make an exception to introduce the item name? I don't like question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that would be possible because obviously some people do use this to give to candidates and we wouldn't want the candidates to see the item name. But perhaps there's some other functionality that will be a workaround for that. Have a think about
tick a box.
Yes. Tick a box. Yeah.
I think we find it useful if you could include the metadata on there as well. So, so if you need to send it to an examiner to check the item, and they've got the correct answer where it's from in a test spec.
Yeah. Yeah. So so rather than just having this downloading it as a candidate paper, it's downloading it review paper option perhaps as well, a third option.
Yeah, an extra button there.
Yeah, review paper. Yeah, it's a good idea. Word doc.
And also you have to think about the layout of the, it's not the same layout as in Surpass. If you download it, the bold version in Surpass of the text is not bold in if you download it.
It should bring across all the formatting. So if it's not doing that, if you report that, they'll pick it up.
No, you're right. I'm always right. No, it's not working.
Okay, if you just raise that with the team and get them to look at it, because it should bring across the format.
Where's the team?
Sorry, the BTM.
Maybe we have already.
Yeah, if we try and pick it up after the conference, yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
Sorry. Can see you there.
We've got the test with a variety of different questions types.
Yeah.
Some advanced, some standard. Will this print the ones that isn't?
No, it won't. It only shows tests that contain all of the supported question types. No, it wouldn't, no. It's more of an automatic process that just picks up anything that meets the criteria.
And what if you've got an attachment in the question?
It wouldn't be included if there was an attachment because there'd be no way to open the pop-up within the paper. So that's one of the, like video and audio, that's one of the things that we can't currently support. And the reason we don't include the non-supported thing is that we wouldn't want to produce a paper that isn't correct in a way, that was almost, missing an attachment or missing a particular question. We wouldn't want to produce that in case it accidentally got distributed and you didn't realise that there was stuff missing from it. Yeah, of course, yeah.